Hey there, friends and enemies, JoPaWrites here again, and today I've got a brand new episode of the Weekly Loot Drop talking about everything in the looter video game space from Destiny to Diablo and everything in between. So thank you so much for tuning in, stopping by, listening to this on whatever your favorite platform is. Make sure you leave a like, review, all that kind of good stuff helps me out tremendously. But I'm going to jump right into it with a game that I know a lot of people have been interested in asking me my thoughts about, and that is Redfall. So this is a game that I didn't even realize was technically a looter, and I don't know if it would be considered as such, but again, lots of people were bringing it up in the looter space. They compared it to things like Borderlands with some hints of Destiny, and believe that's why the game didn't perform as well as expected. For me personally, I just think there was a lot that just did not go well with this. Like, you look at the development, mid-cycle, they did have the acquisition where Arcane was taken over by Microsoft, and Microsoft said they should have stepped in, but they didn't. They didn't change anything, and they had some weird announcements too after this. Essentially, Phil Spencer said that they didn't take over this because it was too far in development, but they did give some guiding light hands, whatever, to Starfield, which is kind of strange considering they're only dropping a few months apart. Even their original timeframes were pretty close together, so that's rather weird, but that's kind of another story. Back to Redfall, I think there's a little bit of the soul missing in that game that you would have loved to see from the older Arcane games. You look at games like Deathloop and the like, they just had a uniqueness to them, original vibe that feels missing from Redfall. And there's going to be people who enjoy the game. There's going to be people who like Redfall and will go to bat for it. And if you like Redfall, I am not telling you not to enjoy it. Absolutely enjoy whatever game you come across. I just think from a more meta perspective, there are some questions to be asked about Xbox in general and the state of their exclusives, but also wondering if some of these studios don't try to take things from other studios, things they've learned, things they've seen, and implement them into a game. And so, but since they're not designed around those systems, they kind of become like piecemeal amalgamations of a game that's not the total sum of its parts. And that's really a thing that I think Anthem learned that lesson. We've seen it from like Marvel's Avengers. Marvel's Avengers really suffered from that, of not knowing what it wanted to be. The gameplay in that game was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. The campaign I thought was pretty solid as well, but it was stuck in between this story game with some potential end game possibility, but also not really deep diving into the end game, making it as involved and intricate as it needed to be, not having enough content there to keep players going long term. Outriders is another one that kind of falls in a similar vein. Tiny Tina's Wonderlands as well, where they base concept is good, but then once you get past that and you're like, okay, this is a game that wants to keep players engaged over the long haul, it falls short in that area. And so that's really where you kind of question that. Now, Redfall, the initial gameplay, I know there's a lot of issues on PC, a lot of struggles, and ultimately, I hope it turns it around. Maybe we'll get something like Final Fantasy Realm Reborn or No Man's Sky. Those kind of games would, even if you look within Bethesda itself and Fallout 76, that's a game that's done a dramatic 180 from where it first started. So overall, I am hopeful that that game turns around. I don't know if they're going to stick with it or if it'll be like an Anthem situation where they'll just cut their losses and move on. But ultimately, I do wonder if some of these games, especially from established studios that have things that they're very, very good at, and they branch out and they're like, Crystal Dynamics is a perfect example, just like Arcane. They specialized in a game type that's very different from what they were asked to do, with this kind of expanding into a looter genre. And I don't know if that's the case, or if you should instead take the lead from developers from studios like Bungie, from studios like MMOs that have been successful, Final Fantasy 14, and use those examples, those people, to build your next always online, ongoing looter shooter, whatever the case may be. And I think that's absolutely necessary if you're going to have a successful game like that, because there's a lot of things I think people don't realize when they're creating looters, of the amount of content you actually need, the places you can obtain gear versus where you can use gear, all that kind of good stuff. So that was kind of like a side tangent, but really it all comes down to Redfall just not being what everyone kind of hoped and expected it would be. Next up, we got the teaser for Bungie Destiny 2 Season of the Deep. This is a season that I think, I already went over this in another video on the channel on my YouTube, youtube.com/JoPaWrites, if you wanted to check that out as well. But Season of the Deep is an interesting scenario, right? We're getting some additional Lightfall content, which is interesting in and of itself. We're getting a hand cannon that was originally shown off in some promo work for Lightfall. So I know there's going to be complaints about cut content or whatever, but we're still getting it. It's just getting it at a delayed time frame, which I think is fine, because doesn't cost you anything. If you have Lightfall, you'll get the new Lightfall content. So that's not really a worry. They're not trying to upcharge for that. But then it comes down to Season of the Deep delivering, because there's been talk in the community of doing a season of health. Essentially, we're overhauling the strikes and the Crucible playlists and all that kind of stuff, the general playlists themselves. I don't see that happening before the final shape. There's just no way. I feel like they have their outline ready to go, and we won't see any major shifts in the way the game is delivered or what we are to expect until after the final shape. That's just a personal opinion of mine. I just can't see it happening. I'm assuming every season we have another piece of the puzzle leading to the final shape and the final confrontation with the witness. Now, all that being said, I do hope Season of the Deep is an absolute banger. We know there's a new dungeon coming, which is nice. We got the Lightfall quest, we got the seasonal quest, we got exotics, all that kind of good stuff. So hopefully it's all good. A lot of tuning. They've already announced a lot of changes coming to the game. This week I made 2 separate videos on changes that we know from a individual article and also the TWAB, which was we don't often get that much. The season is not far away either. So once Guardian Games wraps up, we're going to see what the next season has in store, and I'm excited personally. I think this season is going to start off really hot. Whether it stays that way throughout the course of the entire season, I don't know. But if it doesn't, that doesn't matter to me, because we do have Diablo on the table next, and that's very, very exciting. Another thing that Bungie did that I think they do have to course correct is the increased cost of the seasons, which is fine in and of itself, but I do think you need to change the way that silver is purchased, so you can buy a bundle that can specifically purchase the season, and you don't have to buy 2 sets of silver. If you're short by 100 silver, you have to buy another 500. So that's one monetization. Normally, I'm not one to really complain about the monetization things. I know a lot of other people get frustrated by it, but for me personally, I am not concerned with that normally whatsoever. I know costs of games are rising to create them. Time frames are getting longer, and I spend enough hours in these games that ultimately I get my money's worth, but that's one thing I would like to see changed. Now, going back onto Diablo, this weekend we do have the final beta before full launch, which is exciting as well. Another reward you can earn if you miss that, it's a mount trophy, which is nice. You have to beat the world boss after you've reached level 20. So try out new characters if you want to. I'm probably going to play one more character just because I have the itch for the game so bad. But I just am kind of curious on whether I'm going to actually play, kind of lean in that much and spend that much time with it. I've played the past two weekends of the betas already, and so I just want the full thing. I'm tired of my progress not carrying over. I don't want to start another character that I'm going to have to throw away, even though I'm going to, because this beta doesn't carry your progress from the last beta, so you're going to have to start a brand new character who's not going to be carrying forward from the last one, and that's a bit of a bummer. But again, I'm starting a different class anyway, so that doesn't really matter. And I wanted to test them all before I jump into the entire game to see which one kind of has my feel. Right now, it's Sorcerer and Necromancer by far for me. Like, those are my two favorite, and it's not even close. I really wanted to love the Druid more. I'm hopeful that with some of the changes that we're seeing, the Druid is going to be more fun. But right now, if I had to rank them, I would probably personally go Sorcerer, Necromancer, from what I've seen, Rogue, and then Druid, and then Barbarian, in terms of fun factor, how I think the builds are going to work, all that kind of good stuff. So, again, I hope that changes once we get the full launch and all the classes feel strong and powerful and fun. And if that's the case, I'll definitely make one of each, and I'll be grinding out different characters regardless. So, it'll be fascinating to see how that launch goes, because I know the servers are going to have issues. That's a guarantee with these online games. But this is going to potentially be one of the biggest looters we've seen in years, probably maybe even since the launch of Destiny 2, as far as guaranteed success, one that everyone is going to be hyped for, everyone's going to be very excited about, and is really going to launch with a lot of hype and potential. Now, whether it lives up to those expectations, I don't know. From everything we've seen personally, I think it's a surefire, solid game that people will sink a lot of hours into. Whether it's Game of the Year quality, anything like that, remains to be seen. I don't know if a Diablo type game is going to be up for that type of consideration after it's all said and done, because a game that's more unique that comes along, maybe like an Armored Core, if that really blows things away, maybe some Final Fantasy 16, if that's a return to form, all of that would affect what is Game of the Year. We got, obviously, Tears of the Kingdom, the Zelda game as well. So there's a lot of competition this year, which is a good thing. But ultimately, Diablo just has to deliver and be fun for a lot of people for a long time. That's all that matters to me. I'm intrigued in seeing how, when we start getting the seasons, how the replayability works with the seasons. I've never done a hardcore character in Diablo, and I'm thinking about doing that as well once we do get hands-on the full game. At some point, I'm going to start with a base character, and then I'll have probably a base character, maybe one of each. I'll have a hardcore character, and then I'll have seasonal characters as well. So you can already see I'm going to spend a lot of time in that game for sure, and I'm very, very excited about launch. Like I said, beta this weekend, and check it out if you have not had a chance to try Diablo yet. I think it's a good opportunity. They put so much content in the beta that you will know if you're going to like the game or not just from the beta. There's really no questions about that. If you play the beta and you don't enjoy it, you probably won't enjoy full launch. And if you play the beta and you really love it, there's a good chance that you're going to really enjoy your time with the game overall. Now, we also got a developer feedback video on Synced. This is a game that is intriguing to me because it's got separate PvE and PvP elements, which could be a lot of fun. I've played the beta and it was a good time. There was a lot of issues though. I know a lot of people weren't entirely thrilled with the game, but there is the foundation there to be very, very exciting. And the communication from the developer team from Synced has me more excited than anything. You see it with like the day before, like that game where everything is like radio silence and there's just a lot of questions and concerns. I think that's a game that I would rightfully be worried about. With Synced, if the developers keep up the level of communication that we're seeing prior to launch, then there's the potential that it's going to be an absolute banger and one that I think could be very good, which is, again, it's very exciting because we need more competition in the space. We need games that feel different from each other. Like, yes, Synced is third person, kind of reminds me of the combat a little bit of Outriders. You've got it like a companion character that you're rocking with all the time, and then you can jump into straight up PvE, straight up PvP, but they also announced a lot of things that had me kind of excited. They said there's going to be different modes released, and they're going to kind of test them out rapidly, see if a mode is exciting, test it for a month or so. If people love it, they'll introduce it into the core game. If it's not really what they want it to be, they'll remove it and then maybe adjust it in the future with some modifications and bring it back for more testing, which is a very interesting way to do things. The key to Synced is always going to be the player base, right? If it has enough people playing it, I could see it winding up in a space like Warframe, where it's got a dedicated following of people who will play it consistently, who want to grind the game, want to be good at it, will play the PvP, will play the PvE, mix up their builds regardless of what they're doing. They also announced that we are getting new weapons, new locations, all new maps, all that stuff, which again is very ambitious. This is what I worry about a little bit. A lot of pros from what they announced, but the cons would be, are they over-promising? Are they able to deliver on everything they want? Because we've seen it. What happens is, again, going back to Anthem, this is the poster child for mistakes, is that when you launch and the issues start happening, you have server issues, you have bugs, you have glitches, you have mechanics that players are abusing. Once that all starts happening, you have to have people dedicated to taking care of that first. And will you still have enough resources to continue churning out actual new content? That's the question, because both sides cannot be true. You can't just focus on the bugs and not have new content coming, because then players are going to lose interest because they've played everything, done anything, and there's nothing on the horizon. But you also can't ignore the bugs and the glitches that are almost always going to pop up in an online game like this, and just keep churning out new content, and then people are just unhappy with the base state of the game. So you got to find that proper balance, and that's really going to be the question when they're talking about everything that they're going to be delivering in the Synced experience. So for me, if everything comes through as they're telling us, that game is going to be an underrated banger. I think it's going to be very good. If not, if like there's a lot of issues, then maybe it won't be. I do think, like I said, it's one of those games where I think the potential is there. Not everyone's going to love the third-person style. It doesn't have the same gunplay as Destiny, but that's fine, right? Outriders showed that if you have a good base game, a third-person game, especially initially, can be very good. The problem that they've had is they have the weird model of, again, like launching the game, having an end game loop that is repetitive, but they want people to keep playing end game, but there was nothing on the horizon. Like, it took a long time to get the next expansion, the new updates. It took months and months and months, and by that time, it's hard to recapture the players because everyone's already jumped off the game. So for that reason, I do think you want to have the plan for the future, but have people ready to fix the game if there are issues as well. I think there's a balance between that that's very difficult. And not only the model of the game, right? Free to play versus paid, seasonal versus expansions, free updates versus paid updates. These are all questions that influence how a game is received, and losing momentum is one of the biggest problems that these looter shooters face, these looters in general, and I'm hopeful that that gets fixed. Now, we've seen like hardcore games. You got Path of Exile as a looter. That's a great example of a game that caters to the hardcore community, knows what they do best, and they just ride that wave. And they've got, again, a loyal, dedicated community. I think you're going to see Path of Exile will be for the hardcore players. Diablo is going to be the far more popular choice. And there's going to be a lot of people who are jumping into Diablo and staying to play it. And then you've got Synced, which it looks like it's going to be a little bit more hardcore, but might provide that balance because the PvE will allow people to make their builds and do everything. They don't have to go into PvP. But I'll be interested because they did also mention in that game 9-player raids, or like something of that nature as like a PvE experience. If you start doing stuff like that, I'm in. 100%. Definitely count me in on stuff like that. As a Destiny raider, as somebody who likes end game content, that would definitely get me locked into a game like Synced for sure. No news really on the First Descendant or any other looter shooter. Like, we've heard nothing on Arc Raiders, which is surprising because I figured we'd start hearing more about that going forward, but still, it doesn't seem like that launch date is anywhere near being released. As far as the more MMO-like looters, we got Wayfinder has a closed beta upcoming, and then early access in the summer. We've got some MMOs, some more true MMOs that are also going to be launching here this year, potentially. Blue Protocol, don't know if that's going to come out west. We got a look at a brand new MMO that's almost like Dark Souls-esque, which looks like it could be very interesting. So a lot of potential in the space, a lot of excitement. I think Destiny, we're really going to see it start popping off at the end of the year as we jump into the final shape. Diablo 4 is going to probably hit like a truck in the summer. And then in between those two, that's going to be the opportunity for another game to capitalize on that space and really come out with a banger. So anyway, that's going to do it for me. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, again, like, comment, leave a rating, subscribe, whatever platform you're on, do all of that stuff. It helps me out so much. I'm trying to really get people with ears on this podcast because I'm really enjoying doing it. And I think once I start evolving this format, I'm going to start having guests on and all that stuff. So if there are guests you'd like to see me invite on, definitely let me know as well. My name is Jopa. I hope you have a good one, and I'll catch you all later.